Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
Well, we've made it all the way to February the 11th, and let me just take a little personal liberty here to say happy birthday to my son Titus. But February the 11th, we'll turn to our reading, Exodus chapter 26. Let's notice something. Let's notice that we learn from our last reading that God desires to tabernacle or dwell with His people. But notice some of the details, and don't quickly pass over them. Now, you may not be skilled like some people I know and be able to construct this maybe in your mind artistically or seek to go out and put some type of blueprint together. You may not be able to do that, but don't quickly pass by the details of the text, because if you read closely, you'll notice that the tabernacle is patterned after creation, and that's important, because where does God dwell? Well, He dwells, or where does He inhabit? He inhabits the cosmos. He inhabits the creation. Now, that's not in some pantheistic kind of way or some panentheistic kind of way. That's not saying that God is in everything or that God depends upon things. That's not what we're saying. But we're saying that He is transcendent, and He has chosen to create space, and in that space, He desires to inhabit. And why does He inhabit that space? He inhabits that space so that He can be known. And that's important for us. Notice what it says here in Exodus chapter 26 and verse 30. Then you shall erect the tabernacle according to the plan for it that you were shown on the mountain. There again, obedience is being called into play here. God desires His people to do exactly what He says. And then let's skip over just for a minute, especially as it relates to Matthew chapter 24. Providentially, again, as we're reading the Bible, we're seeing these themes interconnected. There's so many connections in the Bible, and through our daily readings, we just get to hit just a few of them. But here's one connection in particular. Look at what Jesus says. Jesus left the temple and was going away, and His disciples came to point out to Him the building of the temple. Now, the temple is patterned after the tabernacle, and we'll get to that. But, verse 2, He answered them, You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another. Now here's the key, that will not be thrown down. In other words, when the temple is destroyed, and it will be destroyed, Jesus prophesied that it would be destroyed. The temple the destroying of the temple is a tearing down of the cosmos. When the temple is destroyed, it gives a picture in its destruction of what's going to happen to the world. And I know many of you, like me, you're reading this text in particular, and you ask a question that we all ask, that the disciples ask, when shall these things be? That's what they say here. Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age? So the same questions that concern us also concerned them. So let's walk through a little bit of the details here. Again, if you have any questions about the details here, you can write us at info@fbcstarkville.com, and I'll do my best to sort of answer some points that maybe you have from your reading. But here's one in particular that I really enjoy. In verse 15, it says, So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, and then in a parenthetical statement, Matthew says, let the reader understand. And you're probably reading that and you're thinking, well, I just don't understand. Well, we will understand when we get over in our reading of Daniel. But that's what the reader understanding, that's the call there. It's not saying you ought to, it's saying you ought to get this because you've read the book of Daniel. Just a few points here in particular as it relates to the end of the age. Verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So after, there's an after sequence. Verse 25, the reason that He tells us these things, He tells us these things so that if you say to you, look, He's in the wilderness, don't go out. If they say, look, He's in the inner rooms, don't believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. And then there's a reference of time as well in verse 30. Then And then, of course, we have in verse 35, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will not pass away. And then verse 36 also marks a difference for us. He's talking about a few things here in Matthew chapter 24, that's Olivet Discourse. And we know that there's several things that he's talking about that because of verses like 36, where it says concerning that day. So there's another day that Jesus is referring to. And about that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as there were the days of Noah, so will be the days of the coming of man. Therefore, verse 44, you must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect.